critically analyzing global affairs. This is the Hrvoje and I Show on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right. I'm joined by James Guzman, once again, American-born writer and insurance broker specializing in non-conventional markets and countries, founder of the Borderless blog and podcast. And if you need health insurance, borderlesshealthinsurance.com. What's going on over in San Miguel de Allende, James?
I am here once again. I remain in San Miguel de Allende. Another Wednesday, a little dreary here, I guess, because of the hurricane stuff going on. But other than that, all things are good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I finally got my internet fixed after calling for 4 days straight. It's really weird because they saw my modem was turned off, and then they just assumed I wasn't here, and then they just unplugged me from the street and gave my connection to someone else. And luckily, there was an open spot. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. It's kind of absurd, you know. But anyways, I got my internet back, and what's on your radar these days?
Oh, you know, it's all good. Just been kind of staying at the home still, you know. So in 2 more days, the baby's going to be 1 month old, so it's still a pretty small child. So, you know, been kind of supporting my wife, taking care of the baby, but kind of staying around the house. And so I've had some time to take care of stuff around the house and also watch some different series or whatever kind of junk I see on, I can see on TV, listen to tons and tons of podcasts, doing yard work and, you know, gardening and stuff like that. But last night I did finish, I watched that new Netflix documentary that some people are talking about, the one about Jeffrey Dahmer. Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard about. I mean, I don't have Netflix, but I recall. I recall when all of that happened. I don't remember how old I was, but I mean, I'm from Illinois, so I was in Illinois, and that guy was, I think that was in Wisconsin. No, not Wisconsin, too far.
Yeah,
yeah, just it's like 2-hour drive, 3 maybe from where I was, and just hearing that story. And how was this film on Netflix about him?
Yeah, so I'd heard a lot of people were talking about it. Some people that I know that are into film and stuff saying it was pretty well written and stuff. And I said, okay, well, the hell with it. Let's watch it. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. You know, like the cinematography and it was written well and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was entertaining. It had some interesting motifs of religiosity at the end when Jeffrey Dahmer actually converts to Christianity and is baptized, and you know, other things like that. And I thought it was pretty accurate from what I know of what happened there. But there were definitely some themes and some things that you know, like with all of these, I just noticed on all these streaming services, they always have these you know, like serial killer series and stuff like that, and movies and things like that. And so it's weird how they want to keep these stories alive or keep kind of this idea of like, and another theme with Dahmer was the Satanism. He was into Anton LaVey Satanism. He had his like a altar and his book there and stuff like that. And so, you know, like, I don't know why they want to keep these themes, but it seems like they want to keep them alive and into in the culture. And it's also kind of interesting. Like at the end, they talked about Gacy, the killer clown, you know, John Wayne Gacy, and this other guy. I actually listened to this podcast series. It's called The Candyman and the Clown, or The Clown and the Candyman. Now I can't remember, but something like that. And it is a full documentary, like real crime podcast, where they show that it's now proven, it's not a conspiracy theory or anything like that, that John Wayne Gacy and this other guy were absolutely connected to a child trafficking ring. And there were a lot of politicians and other very powerful people that were in this ring that were caught. And it's kind of the whole story that hasn't been told, and puts it together into this long podcast form. So Yeah, I'd recommend that if people are at all interested in that kind of thing. I thought that podcast was pretty good. I think it's the Clown and The Candyman, I believe. And so anyway, they did mention that, he was very in the same area, the Dahmer was, and they mentioned John Wayne Gacy, but I don't know. They didn't mention anything about that, about, them being, it was just kind of put out there that they were like lone wolves. But he could very well have been involved in some sort of a bigger ring, because it's really strange. Like, how come all of these serial killers and, crazy pedophile, whatever people, they all popped up at the same time period. And even in the series, they talked about, all the theories, his priest, the Dahmer goes to a priest and he says, well, nobody really knows why there's people like you right now. Some people say it's because of the interstate highway system. Some people say it's because of pornography and all this type of stuff. Well, if that were the theories back then, we all know we still have those, and we didn't, we still don't have that problem. So if it wasn't somehow orchestrated or some weird thing going on, then it was just copycats. But anyways, it's kind of, that's kind of suspicious, I think, the whole serial killer meme, and why they want to put out this very well made and obviously something with a high budget to make, put that back in the public consciousness again.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. It's like, I think there's a number of points there where, why do they keep, pulling that out? Maybe on one hand, we've heard before that Hollywood it's lost its creativity. They are not creating anything original anymore. They're just making remakes of remakes and sequels, endless sequels. So I think we've noticed that trend for the last couple of years. They're not coming up with anything new. So their inspirations run dry. But also, why do they want to keep this alive? As you say, maybe like they want to produce a new generation of, I don't know, such killers, because we've got all the more and more each generation is on all these crazy psychotropic drugs, and then they watch this stuff. It influences you, the video games, the documentaries, the films. So that's also weird. Again, and it's like that's so long ago. Like that. I mean, there's new stuff you can talk about. But what you also, I had no idea that apparently he converted to Christianity, and I do recall reading about the son of Sam, the serial killer in New York. I think it was in the 70s, who killed like 30 or 40 people. I saw interviews with him where he converted to Christianity. He said he had like demons telling him to do stuff. I personally, as a Christian, believe that is possible. Like, there's no way of any of us telling if it's actually true, but I think if, the son of Sam or Jeffrey Dahmer, between him and the maker, if they really, like repented and I think they could be end up in heaven, who knows? But I think, anyways, I don't know what else to say about all of that.
That was basically the reason, as far as in the series, that's what the reason that they gave is because he said that he felt it was the devil working through him. And so if he repented, that he could, be washed of his sins. And so that was the reason that he did that. Or at least that's what he said. And I thought that the last episode on there was kind of interesting, that they did go through that kind of like the religious angle and people that were struggling with hatred of him and how they forgive and forget, something like that, which is a Christian teaching. And that was another thing that I thought was kind of prominent, which is, I guess it's just, there's two things, I guess. One thing was the LGBT thing, because he was obviously gay, and they put this series in the LGBTQ like brand, or not brand, but what do they put them in, like categories? So if you go to the LGBT movies, that's like the top is Jeffrey Dahmer. So that's like, that's kind of like not really great for those people. But so there was that angle, and they really played that up along with the minorities angle. So some of the people that he targeted were Filipinos, and also a lot of Black people, because he lived in a rundown area of town. And they really talked a lot. They had Jesse Jackson there, who was making it a big racial issue. And they even went so far, I thought there was some kind of like, anti-white type programming when his father, who he was obviously like of German ancestry. I think they mention that sometimes in the movies and in the movie. And his father even said like he was genetically disposed, or he said he was genetically programmed to like be so sadistic. That was part of his genes, that his father had felt the same way and stuff like that. So I thought there were kind of, things like that. And so anyways, yeah, you have all these different types of narratives that are getting programmed in there. And yeah, I do think that, another thing you could think of is just people being scared of your fellow man, being scared to go out because you never know. There's this regular, nice, middle class, middle-aged white guy could be this disgusting, crazy serial killer, So it also, in a way, lowers trust in society.
Edward Snowden has received his Russian passport, and apparently Russia does allow for dual citizenship. And you also posted an article from Mark Nestman of Nestman, NESTMANN.com. I've been reading his stuff for over a decade, and he's all about international diversification. What are your thoughts on Snowden getting a Russian passport? Apparently, you can serve as a Russian soldier for a year and get Russian citizenship. So, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't like really gone down the Snowden rabbit hole as much as I probably should. I have seen him speak and I watched the movie and, I always thought he was a hero and stuff, but I also hear a lot of people saying that it's like the whole thing is a psyop, like Snowden. Because, after all is said and done, what really happened now, everybody just thinks that, okay, yeah, we know that the intelligence agencies or NSA or whatever have complete access to all our stuff online and everybody just accepts it, right? They're doing all this illegal stuff, but oh well, right? So it's almost like setting up the panopticon where you're getting watched all the time, but you just don't know at what point, right? And so you just kind of you always self-regulate. So that was the result of all the Snowden revelations. But regardless, I hope he enjoys it in Russia. Seems like an okay place. I mean, I've never been over there, but I have some Russian friends, and I see them on social media, and it seems to be beautiful. They're having a blast. They live the same life as we are over here. So they were here in Mexico visiting for a while, and they said it's no problem over there. And as far as the passport, if you go over there and you want to fight in the war, you can go fight for a year and you're eligible for a passport. Or if you're on the other side of the conflict, you can go and join the Ukrainian front line, and then I think after 2 years you get eligible for a passport. But in Ukraine, you're not eligible for double citizenship, so you have to give up your current citizenship if you want to do that. But with Russian, you can have two. I don't know if you can have a U.S. and Russian passport. I don't think that one of those countries wouldn't be happy about that. but even if you're from the U.S., you cannot. You have to give up your U.S. Citizenship if you want to become Ukrainian and use yourself as cannon fodder and perhaps survive.
I don't see any reason you couldn't be a dual U.S. or Russian citizenship because the law says both countries have dual citizenships unless the U.S. government specifically intervenes. But also, as the article by Nessman says, you can become a French citizen by joining the French Foreign Legion for 5 years. I've mentioned before the Russian option. The other Russian option is to go live in Siberia for 5 years and work a plot of land, and you could also become a Russian.
Wow, sounds like a blast.
And just to what you're saying, I've been to Russia, and it's an interesting place, but it's not for everyone. I can literally live anywhere. I've lived in like our Siberian conditions, basically, on the northern tip of Kazakhstan, and but it's not for everyone. It's sort of rougher conditions, and it doesn't have all of the amenities that one might like. And I'm a Slav. Russians are Slavs, and so I have that sort of familiarity. And so, not quite for everyone. But
what do you mean? Not for everyone? What is it lacking?
I mean, you have the culture stuff, and then, the cuisine. It's not, if you're used to like Latin America or Western Europe or US, you might not get quite all of the things you're used to. Just different mentality and things. Everyone points out how in America everyone smiles sort of ridiculously, like everyone just this fake sort of smile. Hi, how are you? It's fake, but in Russia, it's like no one really smiles on the surface unless they really mean it, which I kind of prefer. Like I kind of prefer when people smile when they really mean it, instead of being sort of fake, going around every day with the fake smile on your face.
Something interesting about the smile, like biologically, whether you think that humans evolved from apes or not, if you want to look at similarities, apes when especially the higher level apes, when they smile, it usually is submission. So like if another ape comes and like attacks them or is like running towards them in an aggressive way, they'll smile. And it's kind of like when a dog flips over. So like smiling means basically like I surrender. So
yeah, I get what you're saying.
I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But but also in Russia, it seems like they have like, politicians, like actual like manly guys, and people of action, like, that I don't know, that I would expect to be, with a powerful government.
Well, in general, the men are manly, and the women expect the men to be manly in most of the world, except for the Western woke world. I mean, seriously. And I think that's right. And that's how it should be. Like literally 95% of society in Russia and Kazakhstan and Mongolia, where I've lived, the men are like super manly, and that's how it's always been since the beginning of time. And I think that's how it always should be, my opinion.
Yeah.
And it has to be that way. I mean, the harsh conditions, like I've lived in the Gobi Desert, and I mean, it's brutal, and the men need to know how to, the animal husbandry, building stuff, fixing stuff. And, the women have the jobs that the women do. The men have the jobs that the men do. Otherwise, if we wouldn't have survived up until now.
Right. Yeah. I just know, especially when we talk about conflict, I mean, in just the time of peace and everybody's happy, and, we're all, trying to push back the borders of society or whatever in these times of boom time or whatever, then that's one thing. But then when you're talking about conflict, okay, well, it's really funny when they have all these, like, they juxtapose the pictures of, the United States, they got the Marines wearing pink heels or whatever. And then they got the transgender, what is she, like the Space Force, the Air Force lady. And they got a bunch of people. I know, I was in the military and it's a lot more based on kind of politically correct training, and definitely not on merit and on strength. It's a lot of busy work. Honestly, it's a lot of people that are just like there for a paycheck. They really don't know anything about the Constitution or the history of the United States. And they don't really care about it, to be honest with you. It's like any bureaucracy. That's how it was when I was in, and it's probably worse now. It's like the post office or something, and so, you see that up against like some really, big, guys from Russia that are like used to, running around in the snow when they were little babies or whatever. Or like, sometimes they show the Chinese army, doing all these different types of exercise, and it's just kind of funny.
So guess who's in Mexico, James? My mayor from Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, is traveling to Mexico City. So I didn't have to go back to Chicago to visit her. She's come to me. Apparently, Chicago and Mexico City, they have a sister city relationship. So yeah, Lori's in the country. And I may have forgotten to mention now. I've left the Adriatic, and I'm coming to you live from back in Mexico. So yeah, just interesting that Lori is light-footing around Mexico.
Oh, I didn't hear the gunshots. I didn't know you were back yet.
Yeah, right. The gunshots, dogs in the background.
Yeah. Right.
But there is, I mean, good news. Some other stuff that I've been picking up is this connectivity trend with Mexico, where I'm reading that El Paso, Texas, wants to reestablish direct flights to Mexico. This is going to increase, of course, business and offering nonstop flights from El Paso to Mexico City, Guadalajara, where I am, Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, Chihuahua City, and that's so cool. Like I could just hop a flight now. I might go more often than to Texas. I mean, I've never been, but I might go and I just hop one easy flight and no more masks and that garbage for now, at least. And there's that,
really?
Well, is it? Well, some airlines is weird. Some are doing it, some aren't.
How was it, by the way? You were just on a. Yeah, you should tell it. I haven't flown in a while. How's that with the?
Actually, the mask mandate at the airports here in Mexico, I think in 1 or 2 days they're going to remove it, so you won't need masks in transport anymore, and anywhere basically in Mexico. So, do they still have the vax requirement for foreigners though in the U.S., which is nuts? But anyways. Yeah. Also, Panama, Copa Airlines is going to be launching new routes all across Mexico as well. So you've got Panama connecting with Mexico, Texas connecting with Mexico, and so I mean this is a plus, for overall for anyone interested in digital nomadism, expatriation, and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And not just that, but for commerce in general, for business. I guess I'll have to fly again. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But Texas is so close. I've always just been, just driven, it's not that big of a deal just to drive up. But I guess if it's not such a pain in the ass, then I can try a flight. But yeah, I don't mind Texas. I think it's a good kind of area if you want to straddle, Mexico, Texas. Both of them have different things that are beneficial. So, they have a lot of conferences and things like that up there. And so it's good to be able to pop up quickly. Unfortunately, where I live, it's like an hour away from any airport, but it's right there in Guadalajara. So no, that's cool, man. And I look forward to, hopefully we can get past this, the COVID madness, and they don't bring it back in the winter or something. But, I like, the travel being open up to more people, but I'm not sure if that's the trend, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And another trend is the legalization of cannabis. And we've got, again, in the news, ex-President Vicente Fox calling on lawmakers to finalize cannabis regulation. I did an interview on TNT some months back with Luis Armendariz, who's a lawyer working on that in Mexico. He's going to have a world summit over near you in Guanajuato in October next month called Canna Mexico. Are you going to go? That's interesting.
You can come with me. I think it's between. Let's go, man. We'll do a YouTube video.
We'll live stream for TNT.
We could live stream
from the
Smoke
cannabis.
A bong. We'll be smoking bongs and do a Cheech and Chong episode.
Chong, yeah, I met him back in the day. You can go to my website and see a photo with me and Chong. I went to his comedy show and he was just walking around. It's funny. He actually. He literally said, he called me handsome. I was flattered, So, I'm not joking. Like
you got hit on by Chong.
I got hit on by Chong. I'm not joking. So, anyway, so we've got this thing going on in Mexico. It says the Supreme Court has ruled the prohibition of marijuana unconstitutional and directed Congress to legalize its recreational use. But a bill to that end still hasn't passed the Senate a year and a half later. That's what I talked about with Luis Armendariz and TNT. It's really going slow, the process. I actually thought it was going faster, but it's really going slow.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, if they are able to do that and just legalize it across the whole country in one fell swoop, then it's going to be the largest market in the world. with legalized recreational use of cannabis. So that's a pretty big deal. And the big thing with Vicente Fox is he's saying that it's going to take away a lot of the money from the cartels. I'm not so sure about that. I guess we'll see. I mean, I suppose they still make some money with it, but I mean, a lot. I don't know how much money are they really making selling brick weed to people in the U.S. or Canada? Because they got, if anything, I think they're bringing more of it down here to Mexico, like the really good stuff that they grow up there. So I don't know how much that's going to affect it, but I guess any little bit helps, and I'm all for it. So I hope that they do that.
But it's funny. The Vicente Fox says in an interview, he says, legalizing and regulating this industry will take a lot of revenue away from cartels and put it in the hands of marijuana growers and business people. But guess what's gonna happen? Okay, the cartels won't grow the marijuana, but then they're going to go to those same marijuana growers and extort them for the piso tax, like the 20, 30, 40% cartel tax, where if you don't pay them, they're going to they kill you. And so
another way to look at it, how I used to always, before, I used to say that, because every time a politician would talk about legalization, they would always say, you need to be legal, regulated, and taxed. And I'd be like, well, damn, if you're going to regulate and tax the hell out of it, then just leave it illegal, because at least in the United States, even when it was illegal, it was still very, it was plentiful and you could get it pretty much everywhere, and it was cheap. And so if they're just going to make it really expensive and put it in the hands of like Philip Morris and all these tobacco companies, then just keep it illegal, but eventually I have accepted that there's just so much bad that goes on with the drug war that we just have to legalize it. But yeah, it grinds my gears whenever people say that. It's like, like, can you imagine like lettuce? Like, we need to legalize lettuce, but it must be taxed and regulated to death. It's like, why? It's just a plant. You know what I mean? You should be able to grow it in your backyard and use it however you want. But yeah. So anyways, who knows what, that's where the devil's in the details, how this whole thing gets rolled out. But I'm sure that there's a lot of big companies just like Vicente Fox is like just licking their chops, ready to get in a giant, like I said, the biggest market in the world once a market like that opens up, the first movers are going to be the big winners.
And speaking of winning, we touched on this, I think, last time, just more positive news in terms of Mexico's opportunities going forward. Mexican automotive exports reach highest point in last 15 months. Mexican-made vehicle and auto parts exports total 15 billion. That's 42% up from last year. And I did see on the Telegram channel, your favorite, the Dollar Vigilante, he telegrammed something to the tune of, although I do think it makes sense. He said, if you're thinking of buying a European manufactured automobile, probably not a good idea because of everything that's going on now in Europe and the collapse of manufacturing. You'll need spare parts and stuff. So I think that's smart. It's probably better to stick. If you're in Mexico buying a North American made or Mexican made car, or other jurisdictions, even Toyota, which is sort of pushing back against the ESG stuff, it might be better to get, go with a manufacturer like that, like Toyota. You don't want to rely on regions like Europe that who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that he still has some common sense. I mean, yeah, obviously you want to buy a car that's like you can get parts close to you. But if you're going to buy a European car in Mexico, I mean, you're probably really rich anyway, so you probably afford it. But yeah. I mean, of course that and they manufacture a lot of stuff here in Mexico. So yeah, I like just personally, I don't try to spend a lot of money on cars, so I just try to buy something I know is going to be cheap to fix, and I just ride it till the wheels fall off.
Yeah, as you said, in Mexico, you're either really rich or a drug dealer. No, I'm just kidding. I do the same thing with cars. I drive them until they fall apart or the transit police take them away from me, as this happens. So that's a long story, though. Just more good news out of Mexico is that the federal government is planning to build a $4 to $5 billion natural gas processing plant in the Gulf coast of Veracruz, from where natural gas would be shipped to Europe, says Lopez Obrador. And he's saying, so again, we might be helping Europe not freeze this winter. It's interesting on many fronts. The AMLO government, especially in terms of energy, is doing quite well. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I hope the like someone in the U.S. State Department does blow up that natural gas thing. That would be a shame, you know. So that I heard they have a habit of doing that. But yeah, no, hell yeah, man. It'd be nice. It seems to me that, you know, Mexico in the future, I hope I'm not, you know, let's knock on wood here, that you know, as far as the energy situation here, it's looking okay. And seems that the government, at least this government, is pretty dependent on keeping the country sovereign as far as and independent as far as energy goes. And they do have, you know, it's a large country with lots of resources. So yeah, I think that's good news.
But I was thinking about this, I think today or yesterday, just going around a bit and thinking of the population, 125 or so million people in Mexico. And in some ways, I feel like the government here, in, you know, maybe in other countries in Europe or somewhere else where they're more politically, the power is concentrated and the technocracy maybe is more advanced and there's less of a population. So the leaders fear the population less. But I feel here in Mexico, at least for now, they can't go too far, no, because easily you can have the people, you know, do another revolution or just get angry with the government, no?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the idea with the whole, whatever they're calling it, the kind of pink wave going throughout Latin America. I think it has to do with kind of more populist movements and that kind of thing going on. You know, there's a theory that as technology improves, that the governments, the nation states, are going to find it harder to keep the higher taxpayers within their borders if they don't treat them well. And if, you know, people are upset that in a lot of ways, because travel was a lot harder, communication was a lot harder, that, you know, the governments could treat their subjects as basically employees, and that they would switch to kind of a client model where, especially like I'm saying, not just all the public, but that the tax-paying public, since they would be able to leave, that the governments would have to treat them more like clients. And so that they could leave at any time. So they have to like treat them well. So, you know, possibly this is kind of a pivot for different types of governments that are trying to, you know, answer to the public in different ways, and you know, get people to want to move there and to want to do business there and that kind of thing. And I also think that it's kind of a breakdown in the American-led globalist order that we've been under. I think we're going to kind of a different type of a model, and a lot of these governments are kind of this new wave that's going throughout Latin America.
Multipolarity is going to save us. Yeah, well, sure. We'll see. But again, there's I had Jesse Zorwell, my TNT colleague, on. Was it last week? And he's pretty black-pilled on it, and I am sort of as well. That multipolarity will actually.
What does he say?
Lead us toward a world government. And if you look at at the technical nature, that's how a world federation is basically the U.S. Federated model writ large, where you plug in all 200 nations, like the 50 U.S. states are in this loose federation.
What is?
The world government is basically a world federation. So you would put together all 200 states.
What world government, though? What are you talking about? Like you're talking about like the UN or something?
Oh, multipolarity. I mean, it's a whole nother subject. BRICS plus, and then this whole new multipolar world about evening out the power, where the U.S. has too much power and it's losing its status while the rest of the world, gains a bit, a balancing sort of act. But anyways, I did want to go back to more good news about Mexico, given what we just talked about, the auto manufacturing, the increased connectivity, the petroleum, the lithium that's been nationalized, Lithium-X, I think it's called. And now 15 Italian businesses or companies have come to Mexico as part of nearshoring. And it says they're going to create a manufacturing center for 15 of these food, agro-industrial, biomedical, and Italian technological companies who are going to invest in Mexico. So again, yet more good news. So, despite the security situation, the overall trend, and we've got the same problems as everywhere else. Inflation, wages are not increasing, while real estate and everything else is increasing. But there are, I think, just more and more increasing opportunities. You've got all of these foreigners flooding in. I was just talking to a Mexican friend last night, and he dated a Chinese American. It's interesting. And she just came here for no reason. She just came here to become a digital nomad, and been here for like a year, just working as a digital nomad in Mexico. And it's just shocking to hear how so many foreigners are flooding in and becoming the digital nomads in Mexico. So, yeah.
I've always thought it was interesting that, when you're all over Europe or when you go to all kinds of different places, you always see Asians and specifically Chinese tourists. They're really big, especially in Europe. But I've noticed, the time has been Latin America, especially Mexico. I never see them here. I don't know if they're like scared of, they hear about Mexico and they're just like, skip it. You know what I mean? But you see a lot of people from different parts of the world, but I haven't seen the big amount of Chinese that I do in other countries. But yeah, for sure. A lot of people come down and I think we've spoken about Peter Zeihan before. I don't agree with everything that he says, his outlooks. But one thing that he says interesting is just that the U.S. specifically and Mexico, obviously they complement each other. They have still a demographically healthy. Right next to each other. And as we were just talking about, things go down to maybe multipolar, or however you want to call it, people concentrating on their own hemispheres, that they would be complementing each other's economy as well. And just the big wild card is the safety issue in Mexico, because, it can, all these people that are, putting, foreign direct investment, that's great. But, if they don't feel secure with their, especially billions of dollars of investment, then they're just going to go somewhere else. So I think that at some point in time, they're going to have to do something about it. They're going to come in and do, there's going to be some sort of a foreign intervention or something to try to get the security situation under control, because it's just so much money up for grabs. That is basically, unfortunately, what it boils down to.
And just somewhat related to the security situation, I saw a piece of news that I thought was kind of amusing, and it just kind of tells you how bad things are in this sense, that the government in Guadalajara has created a new app on your phone where if you're going to buy a car, you can actually solicit a government agent. I forget from which department, but you just make like a solicitation, and then the government agent will meet with you in person, like wherever you're buying the car from, and check the car to make sure it's not a stolen vehicle. Because if you buy a stolen vehicle, then you can get in trouble with the police. Even if you bought it fair and square, get in trouble with the police or get it taken away. I don't know. But how bad is it when you have to solicit through an app a government agent to check the car you're thinking of buying to make sure it's not stolen? I mean, it's good news. So.
Yeah, I mean, normally you have to go to their office, and they're just like, "Oh, you missed this piece of paper, you missed that piece of paper," and it's a big pain in the ass. So, I mean, I suppose that's more convenient, but convenience is the double-edged sword that we're being sliced with. So it's more convenient, but what does that mean down the road?
Yeah, And we got about a minute or a little more left. You're going to stick around with us, right? And Vance from My Latin Life will be joining us. So were you? I can't recall. You were on his podcast, or you're familiar with him? No.
Yeah. I've been on his podcast.
So we can sort of riff for people interested on Latin America, beaches, digital nomadism, expatriation, tax stuff, residencies, you name it, food, women. You and I are both married to Mexicans. I think Vance is flying solo. And so, we talked last time about passports, Vance and I. And so, just think of some stuff we can go over. Remind people again, best places to find you on the internet.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, guys, hit me up, jamesguzman.com. You can check out my stuff there if you need a consultation call. And as always, I help people with international health insurance at borderlesshealthinsurance.com. And just check out, I got blogs and podcasts and stuff there, so you can get all kinds of free info at borderlessblog.com.
All right, stay on the line, James. We'll be right back after the break with both James and Vance from the Borderless blog and My Latin Life. We'll be right back. All right, I don't usually do this, so this is something new and fun, something different. It's going to be the Three Musketeers, the three of us today. James from Borderless blog is still on the line with us, and back with me is Vance from mylatinlife.com. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Whether you're interested in second passports, permanent residencies, taxes, digital nomad hotspots, nightlife, city guides, and LatAm travel tips, mylatinlife.com has got you covered. How are you doing, Vance?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, good stuff. And James, are you still with us?
I'm here. I'm awake. Just cracked another Modelo.
All right, or mezcal. What's your favorite drink in the Latin Americas, Vance?
I like a good Malbec from Argentina. I also like mezcal, tequila, pretty much everything. Rum in the Caribbean, anything, man.
Yeah, I like more so the artisanal Mexican beers is mezcal as well. James's friend out in San Miguel does the mezcal stuff. Jonathan Lockwood, he's been on TNT before, and yeah.
Well, how's before when we were out in Guadalajara, you and I, Hrvoje, we had some mezcal and stuff. But and I used to do that a lot. I used to drink a lot of mezcal. We get really great artisanal stuff straight from Oaxaca. Really amazing. But actually, I stopped drinking that. It's just so powerful. I drank it for years, but I've been like cutting back a lot lately. So I just completely stopped. I just stopped buying it and stopped having it around me, honestly, because you could just you get I can get away from you. You know what I mean? And it tastes good.
An age too, like I'm finding I can't really drink anymore. But just on the speaking of alcohol, I just found this hilarious when I was hanging out with some Mexican friends. I think this was last year, and you said Modelo, right? So you have Grupo Modelo, which is like the big brand of beer. I think they own Corona and Modelo and other such stuff. And they've got these they look like hangers around town. Have you seen those? It's like half a beer can.
Yeah,
that's the building looks, a small building looks like half of a beer can, and it's like a hanger. You drive in and you got all the beer. And they've got an app now where you can just order. They've got little stations all over the place, and you can just order like a 6-pack, and it'll get to you like in 5 or 10 minutes. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, on Rappi and a couple of those delivery apps. I think that's one of the benefits of Latin America is you can actually get decent alcohol delivery, especially after hours, something that in Canada definitely can't happen. I think it's coming more to the States, but it's pretty developed in Latin America, alcohol delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, just any kind of food delivery. I see neighbors, they get their breakfast delivered, lunch, dinner, beer. I think we talked about this before, James. Even the auto parts in Mexico shop was trying to get an app to deliver you auto parts like quickly. So in some ways, Latin America is advancing, as you said, Canada or US in these terms. But
yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I remember in Medellin, Medellin, that's when I first used Rappi, and it was like changed my life. That was the first time I'd ever experienced that before. And you could, like, they have everything that was at the grocery store. You could just, flip through all the different selection of lettuce or, beer or whatever it is, and you pick it, and it'll, come to your house in 20 minutes or so. You could get meat from the butcher. You can get money. Like you can get them to take money out, and it'll come, they'll come to your work. They could come to your house and just deliver you like a big stack of cash. And it was kind of funny because, a lot of the guys are like dating on, Colombian Cupid or Tinder or whatever. And then they, like send an Uber to go get their date. And then they'll go send a Rappi to go get their food. And they just like never have to leave their house, even for dates and like for food or anything.
Yeah, they'll be creating the ultimate. They'll be creating the ultimate Jabba the Hutts. Yeah. Just
everything can be delivered.
Yeah, crazy. I was going to ask you, Vance, as I've been chatting with James for an hour, but maybe to get into some of the things you're most passionate about in terms of Latin America or digital nomadism or expatriation, or maybe just some of the things you've been researching or getting into lately. And then, James and I can add in our 2 pesos. I last week when we chatted, I enjoyed it. We talked a lot about the multiple passports. Apparently now you can become a Russian mercenary for a year and get a Russian citizenship. So there's that. What's some of the stuff you've been looking at?
Yeah, I think there's so much stuff. I think territorial tax countries come to mind. I think it's just such a superior tax system where you're only basically taxed for the money that you bring into the country, and money that you earn offshore is not taxed and does not need to be reported. And so it's I think it's like one of the major trade-offs in Latin America, where the big 4 countries are, in terms of popularity and economy, are, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. And none of these are territorial tax countries. They're old-fashioned residency-based taxation countries. And if you're a resident and you fit pretty loose requirements, you're taxed on your worldwide income. But there's a lot of spots out there that are territorial tax countries. I'm thinking about Central America, the Caribbean, Paraguay, Ecuador, Uruguay, things like that. And these are places where you can potentially live year-round and not pay any tax, pay 0% tax. So I think that's a very interesting trade-off that we need to think about in Latin America.
Yeah, and I know for U.S. citizens, for example, I've seen you tweet it, and I've been dealing with this for years. For example, if I'm a U.S. citizen, for example, living in Mexico or Colombia, you have the foreign earned income exclusion up to 100. I think you posted the latest is $112,000 US dollars, which I mean I don't have to worry about because I don't get close to that. But so from the U.S. standpoint, I would owe the U.S. government nothing, right?
If you're outside the country, sure. But yeah, there's so many factors at play. It's hard to say that definitively. And then, it just makes me think about, I think a lot of expats do want to end up spending time in those big 4 countries, probably specifically Mexico and Colombia. And they're just like, expats are just sort of battling with this idea of like, how can I spend time in Mexico and Colombia without paying tax there? And specifically, how could I potentially spend more than 6 months there without paying tax? And it's a little bit different in Mexico and Colombia. They have different definitions of things. And Mexico is a little bit more of a gray one. And, I think I enjoy hearing more and more anecdotes about how people are addressing it, because it's a very interesting definition of Mexico. I think we're talking about Mexico a lot on this program. I didn't hear the last hour, but obviously, James lives there and everything. And so, I'm continuing to try to figure out how it might be possible to structure things to live more than 6 months a year in Mexico, and feel comfortable from a tax perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the laws are always changing, and they are, digitalizing things with the tax offices, and something one has to stay up to date with. Maybe just to bring up the issue of politics, I'm just curious. We've got on some of your thoughts, whatever they are. We've got Lula versus Bolsonaro now in Brazil. Apparently, Lula has widened his lead over Bolsonaro. We had Gustavo Petro in Colombia win. We've got the Croatian Chilean Boric, Marxist in Chile, wanting to take away everyone's guns and put in a new constitution, which failed. What's sort of your overall picture on the politics in the Latin American space?
Oh man, we've talked a lot about that, Hrvoje. I think we talk about that every week. I think that you're probably right. I mean, looks like Lula's, as far as Brazil goes, I think that's unfortunate. I did see this recent hit piece that Reuters put out, and they were saying that it was a bank robbery, that they were supposedly, they were using these guns that they had gotten legally because of Bolsonaro's policies, and that there were all these criminals that are running around with guns. But you can obviously see the trend that homicides and all violent crime has been cratering since Bolsonaro has done the reforms as far as that goes. And, the rest of these people want to do the opposite. So that sucks. And, I watched the UN speech by Petro the other day. I thought I'd give him a chance to see what he has to say. I watched the one by Bukele also. And Petro, he was talking about the cocaine plants, stopping the drug war. And I'm for ending the drug war. Again, that's something we talk a lot about. But then he's just always comparing it to oil and climate change. That was his whole thing, is like, we need to stop the drug war because of climate change. And it's just so lame, I can't remember whatever the other stuff, but everything else other than like the drug war stuff, I thought was dumb. And then Bukele, I wasn't very impressed with his thing either, honestly. He was talking a lot about how they need to have more like technology and young people involved in governance, and they need to have more like of these, like, the college things where they go to a college and they pay them money to solve some bureaucrat problem or whatever. and he was talking about it like it was something that's new. I mean, they've been doing that for a long time, and it's always corny, and like it doesn't really come to good solutions. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, they give them some money and they give them a pat on the back, but that's not, like, they don't understand how politics really works when you just go to like some freshman in college that's never even had a job and try to get them to solve this giant problem, especially when they cloak it in like these underlying things like climate change and diversity, or whatever. A lot of times they put feminism and stuff in there, like they did over there at your old college, Hrvoje, and they're like, how do we introduce a CBDC that will be effective with climate change and be diverse so that we can nudge everybody in the right way to that's not solving problems. I mean, this is stupid. So I don't like all those things that Bukele was talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had forgot. He's sort of dropped off my radar. I forgot about him until you mentioned him. I guess because Bitcoin has lost its luster at the moment, and so I mean, what are some of your just general thoughts, Vance?
Yeah, I think I had a quote or a tweet that people picked up on a bit. That was that socialist governments are good for digital nomads. And the reason is that anytime a socialist government gets elected, the currency immediately drops in value relative to the US dollar. And so the country basically just becomes cheaper for digital nomads and expats. Obviously, long term, you're going to want a fiscally responsible government and all that. But in terms of like the short term, 3-6 months, 1 year, socialist governments actually work out much better for expats and digital nomads. Things basically just get cheaper. We've seen that in Colombia. We've seen that in a bunch of different places. So it's kind of a funny knock-on effect that most people haven't considered.
Another thing I would add in there is, it's been amazing how the dollar has just like been surging and surging and surging. And it continues with this, the narrative of like the safe haven. And, like me, I was like 12 years ago, like, no, the dollar is done. Put everything in gold. This is all, the whole thing is I was, working for Peter Schiff and on that whole train. And it's just amazing how even now it's actually almost $80 billion, I believe, with this newest package going to Ukraine. They got, all kinds of unfunded liabilities, just crazy. And everybody continues, all these foreign countries continue to buy the dollar. And I think that's kind of an interesting, maybe black swan or something that people haven't thought of is what happens if the dollar just keeps surging and surging. I mean, it's good for people like us, but it could really have some negative consequences, even for people living in the United States and, other countries too, trying to trade. But it's just amazing that I think there's a lot of off the books money as well that they still just, whenever there's risk, they want those stacks of Benjamins, you know what I mean? And that's like all the people in the world, that's what they still go for.
If you see a socialist government get elected, basically that currency is going to drop by like 10% overnight. And you're just like sick, like time to book my flights.
Yeah, I also wonder about the Brent Johnson, the milkshake theory. So as you're saying, the dollar goes up, but then at one point does the dollar itself blow up? Again, nobody knows. It's like the game of musical chairs. And some great tweets over at on Twitter at my Latin life says, move to Latin America to double your standard of living, half your cost of living. So true. And you also say your ancestors didn't die for you to spend your entire life in a 5-mile radius called your hometown. And for people who are happy with that, that's great. And it's also, fascinating traveling. And now that things seem to be opening up in terms of the COVID-19 84 medical tyranny, I'm considering doing a bit more traveling. James and I were talking last hour about the increased connectivity. For example, Mexico, they might be opening direct flights between El Paso, Texas, and Mexico City and Guadalajara. Panama is introducing new routes to Mexico, so it'll just be easier to get around. And I'm just curious about some of the interesting places both of you have been in Latin America. I want to go to Cuba. I haven't been yet, but even Venezuela, like interesting, edgy spots. I don't know if either of you have been to Venezuela and what it's. Can we just go without a problem, or what are some of your thoughts about doing travel around Latin America?
I personally have not been to Venezuela, but the OG Vance, the original writer on My Latin Life, has, and we have a couple Venezuela city guys on our site. It's interesting you bring it up because even just today, we were talking about Venezuela on Twitter a little bit, and we were talking about real estate investment potential in Venezuela because it really seems like the country is opening up a lot. Just this year, I'm hearing a lot more chatter from people that were related to traveling to Venezuela. I know a couple people there right now through Twitter and whatnot, and they seem to be enjoying it and being able to get by, relatively well. I think there seems to be, Caracas is a different story. It's definitely pretty crazy, but on Margarita Island, and then also in Merida, in sort of the mountains, it's like a student town. Those two regions seem to be pretty chill, and there seem to be foreigners coming back for the first time. And honestly, I'm starting to hear more and more where the sort of more adventurous LATAM travel guys are starting to finally go back to Venezuela because it's a country with really like unlimited potential. And all it takes is maybe a couple announcements from the government saying that they're opening up, and the price of real estate's going to double. Any investments you might have are going to do well. Right now, I'm hearing a lot, and I've seen a lot that you can buy, oceanfront real estate for $30,000. You could buy an apartment on Margarita Island, looking out over the ocean, some of the best beaches in the world for $30,000 US. So definitely something that a lot of us are keeping our eye on.
Yeah, James, what do you think? Have you been to Venezuela?
No, man. No, I don't know. Maybe the closest I've been to Colombia is Colombia. I have not been to Venezuela, man. But yeah, I've heard for years people, that's been the idea is, to get in there as soon as they start opening up. And I mean, yeah, that's where all the opportunity is, where all the risk is, right? So if you can get in the beginning when it's kind of hard to get on the ground floor. The problem with a lot of these really socialist places is that normally when they open up, they have a way to pass it off to their cronies, like all the really prime companies, real estate, assets, etc. And that's usually how it happens. So yeah, if there's a way that you can get in on the ground floor, then just like the cannabis industry that's opening up in Mexico, if you can get in on the ground floor, then you're golden.
Yeah, I think I'd feel safer investing in Venezuela than in the cannabis industry in Mexico.
Why is that?
Like cartel stuff.
Well, I was telling James that last hour because we brought up how former President Vicente Fox. I mean, he's really pushing it. That's his like shtick now. His way of he wants to make money. And I had on the program some months back on TNT Luis Armendariz, who's a lawyer in Mexico working on the legalization of cannabis. He says it's going really slow. I was joking with James though, because Vicente Fox said, well, all the good that's going to happen is they're going to take away the profits from the cartels if they legalize marijuana, and you'll have all these, business owners who are legally growing it. And I just said, well, what's going to happen? The cartels are just going to whip right back around, and okay, they're not growing the marijuana, but they're just going to demand the Paso, the cartel tax to the new, legal business owners. They'll just demand 10, 20, 30%. And if you don't pay it, they'll take you out. So yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you guys are probably obviously both familiar with Jim Rogers, the famous adventure
what's
investor,
so funny?
right?
I was literally just going to mention him because I was going to mention him. I've interviewed him on my Geopolitics and Empire podcast, and I was going to just what you were talking about Venezuela. I was literally going to say, because he's a guy that does that, he goes to North Korea, and I don't know how he does it, but he's invested in North Korea. And I was just going to say, I lived in Kazakhstan, and I was considering opening a stock account there, but was unable to because COVID, and we just fled. But and he had emailed me, Jim Rogers. That I think I had interviewed him from there, and he told me he was very keen on Kazakhstan. But yeah, I mean, what were you going to say about Jim Rogers?
Yeah, like you said, he's very interested in all frontier and emerging markets, and he's definitely mentioned Venezuela quite a few times, across various podcasts. But one thing he mentioned, and I haven't personally looked up on this, but he said something like, same thing as North Korea. He said, like, I would love to invest, but as an American, we can't invest in Venezuela. And I haven't followed up on that to actually look at the rules, because I think we're all Americans on this radio, but I don't know if we can actually invest or if we're going to need to set up some sort of like structure. It would be interesting to know a little bit more of the details.
I don't know the rules. I haven't looked into this, but what if we have a spouse that's not an American? Could she invest? Do you know?
That should work.
So yeah, I don't know how that works.
I don't think there are any rules. That's kind of the point, is it's like lawless and they can just take your shit. So that's why it's like, if it did work out that you kept it, then you'd probably make a ton of money. You know what I mean? But that's kind of the problem.
Or use, like I said, yeah, as you're right, we're all Americans, but as I mentioned before, I've got also Croatian, Mexican citizenship. So I don't know how that works. If you open up the business as But again, as an American, you're required to report from, even if you live on Mars or Antarctica, you have to file your, tax reports. And maybe turning to something a bit more benign, just getting your thoughts on, for people thinking about coming to Latin America, learning Spanish. I think it's one of the easiest languages to learn, although it took me a good 2 to 3 years because my work was all day, every day in English with English coworkers, my students in English. So it just took me longer. And I'm the kind of person where I tried taking classes for like 2 or 3 weeks at the local university, and they were useless for me. I'm just kind of the person who learns by osmosis, where just throw me into the country. And, after a year, I did Peace Corps Mongolia, and in 6 months I was intermediate. Of course, we had the amazing Peace Corps language training for 3 months, but I just sort of learned it over time, just hanging out with all Mexican friends and making a fool of myself on a number of occasions. So what's sort of the approach either of you have towards learning Spanish?
I mean, I'm Puerto Rican, you know what I mean? So my dad's from Puerto Rico. So on summers I would go to Puerto Rico, and, family members, and my grandmother doesn't speak English, so I'd live with her. So, I guess that's immersion. And, speaking with family members and stuff like that. And, but, the thing is that, I grew up when you learn Spanish in like Brooklyn or Bayamon, Puerto Rico, it's like, it's like street Spanish. It's like learning English in Arkansas or something, right? And so I wasn't really happy with the way I spoke Spanish. So that was one of the reasons that I chose to go to university in Madrid, because I figured, well, if I could learn like better, proper Spanish, then I would do it there. So then I was 3 years in Madrid, and been in Mexico over 10 years. So if I didn't speak good Spanish by now, that would be pretty pathetic. So yeah. And, I speak Spanish with my wife and all that. So, but yeah, for other people, I would say, here's what I say. It's just like everything. It's like, if you're serious about it, then get a coach or, a teacher, and you need someone that's going to hold you accountable, and you need to be serious about it, because you see a lot of people that just play around and say, oh yeah, I need to learn that one day. But, if you say, look, I need to learn Spanish in a year, I need to be conversational, and I'm going to, pay someone 2-3 times a week, and we're going to go over, for an hour each of those times. And then, I'm going to practice on my time off, and I'm going to be conversational at the end of it. That's how you get things done, whether it's, whatever it is in your life. If you're really dedicated to it, then, if you have to, then you got to do something like that and have somebody that's going to hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm. And James, if you don't mind me asking, does your wife speak good English?
Well, that was actually one of the things when we got engaged. I said I wanted her to learn good English. I mean, she speaks pretty good English, but we always improve. I learn vocabulary words, and she improves her English and stuff like that. I helped her with a job also that's basically like an online job where it's in English, so that's helping her as well.
Yeah, I had a different experience because I didn't grow up with any Latino blood. So this is something that came to me later in life. For me, it really just kind of came through girlfriends and having a lot of girlfriends that didn't speak English. Yeah. Obviously, some were more bilingual than others, depending on, the country and stuff like that. Got to learn kind of different accents in different areas of Latin America. I wouldn't say I'm like 10 out of 10, but I mean, my current girlfriend doesn't speak a word of English other than like, thank you. That definitely helps a lot.
Yeah. That's especially if you're single, that's like, I think that's one of the best strategies, just get like girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, that doesn't speak your language, and you're going to be forced to have to communicate. And so, I think that's a great strategy, and you get a hot Latin girlfriend. So win-win.
And
yeah, exactly. I think, and if you look at it, if you go on like italki or one of these websites and you want to, pay to talk to someone on Zoom, it's going to be like $7, $10 an hour, where you can just go out in Latin America and have dollar beers on a date, and it's going to cost you less than a Zoom lesson. So guys, just dates every night is a lot better than practicing on Zoom or whatever.
And as James put it, I agree that there's two camps of people: those that play around in terms of learning Spanish, and those that just take it seriously and just do it. I mean, I've met Americans here in Mexico. I met one guy, total like typical American, and been here for a decade, and he's married to a Mexican and has Mexican kids, half Mexican, half American, and doesn't really speak Spanish. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, come on. I mean, at that point, you really should be speaking
it's
Spanish.
Just purely a mindset thing. There's no reason. I think it's just really a mindset thing. And they always say that the second language is the hardest. And so for me, I actually learned French first as an adult living in Montreal. And so I kind of developed a bit of a method that worked for me for learning languages. And then when I learned Spanish, it came easier just because I mentally was over the handicap of speaking in a foreign language. And I just knew that if I practiced an hour a day, if I kept reading, if I kept listening, I just knew I would just keep getting more and more fluent. And so I think if you have that belief and you're putting in the effort, like it's literally guaranteed. It's just like going to the gym. If you just lift things up and down for an hour a day, like You're going to get jacked. Exactly. You don't need the best technique. You don't need this and that. You know what I mean? If you just literally go to the gym for an hour a day, you're going to get jacked. And I think it's really the same thing with language learning.
Yeah, and I was looking for some hacks when I was learning languages. And did you guys ever come across Benny Lewis of Fluent in 3 months?
Yep.
Yeah,
that's one of my first inspirations, actually.
Yeah, he's got some fascinating stuff. And also, James, I just thought to mention, this was just funny. You told me I had on last week on TNT of Students for Liberty, Dr. Wolf von Lehr, and you were laughing that, I mean, you knew him when you were in Spain back in the day, no?
Yeah. Man, it's so funny, like just the world, like watching how where people go, and so Wolf von Lauer, we actually started. So when I was in college in Madrid, I was renting this. It wasn't a big place, and I forget how we became friends, but he actually was sleeping on my floor, and we started this club together where it was every other week we would do an economics club. And it was funny because they were all students of Jesus Huerta de Soto, who was like this economist that people come from all over the world to go down. There was all PhD students, and I don't know, maybe this is going to get too boring, but the point is that we would host these economics club meetings every other week, every other week. And then he was hooked in with Students for Liberty in the United States. And we said, well, we could just call it Students for Liberty Europe or something. And we'll just, we'll tell people that it's Students for Liberty Europe. And so we put a little thing on our flyer. And so we started this group, and it started getting pretty big and all that. And then when I left, I just left it with them. I was like, okay, well, here you go. It's kind of a meetup. You know what I mean? By the way, I always start meetups. I don't know why or whatever, but we're in different places that I stay in, I usually start meetups just to meet other cool people, and it's just an easy way to do that. But anyways, and it kept going, and he is the president of European Students for Liberty, or maybe the whole Students for Liberty. I'm not sure.
No, I think it's the whole,
really high up.
Yeah, the whole Students for Liberty.
And European. So we were the first We were the first European Student for Liberty chapter, and it's all over Europe now. And he's now the president of the whole thing. So it's funny.
It's persistence, that's what happens when you persevere. I did want to just bring up real quick beaches, because I saw over at My Land Life, you were recently talking about best beaches in Panama post. And, for me, coming from Croatia, I like my Croatian beaches because the water is cold. It's very clean and very still water, not very many waves. In Mexico, the waves are often too big, either on the west or east coast, and the water is too warm, but you can still find nice spots. And I have been to Costa Rica, where they also have good water. What's been some of your both of your experiences in terms of beaches around LatAm?
I think I would just say it's very important to time the seasons, especially in Latin America. And you really need to consider sort of the dry season, the wet season, and when you go, because I think the biggest mistake that I see travelers make, and I get DMs like this all the time, and they say, "Hey, I'm booking a flight to Cancun, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "It's July, man. You don't go to Cancun in July." And so I think I would just be sure to time the seasons, and even on the Pacific side of Mexico, the waves are sort of like different heights depending on different times of year. So there's like a surfing season and a non-surfing season, et cetera. So something to consider.
Yeah, for sure. That's good advice. Again, so when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico. Also, when I was in the Navy, we used to go to Curaçao, St. Thomas. Then I lived in Barbados, St. Vincent, other places like that. So, with the Caribbean, you really get spoiled with beaches. They're really some of the most beautiful beaches. They're, clear water, white sand, but it really depends on what you want. If you want like a surfing village, you want, like a big party town. And again, you got to think about the seasons. If you want it really hot or, just kind of like nice restaurants. But, Mexico, everybody knows Mexico has all kinds of different beautiful beaches. We usually go to Sayulita, Puerto Vallarta, because it's a good, if we want to drive, we can easily drive there, take a pit stop in Guadalajara. That's always a lot of fun. We find Sayulita to be really nice. It's got a cool kind of fishing village vibe, but at the same time, now it's been getting a lot of tourists lately. Got some nice restaurants, things like that. And I guess Puerto Vallarta has been getting very popular lately. A lot of people from around the world actually moving there. And so I lived in Acapulco for 2 years directly on the beach. And that was just like nuts. I wouldn't really recommend that, but there's beautiful beaches all over Latin America. It's just, another one that a lot of people like to go to is Puerto Escondido, Mazatlan, and all kinds. There's just so many. And they're, much less expensive, obviously, down there than you would get in a lot of, say like Miami or something. So it's definitely worth checking out.
Turning the page a bit, Vance over at My Latin Life on Twitter says, good countries can go bad very quickly. You cannot rely completely on any one country. We've seen that the past 2 years. Canada went bad quickly, and many have. There's been a record. Yeah, actually, it is China. And just an example that recently comes to mind. So I just want to get your further thoughts, both of you, on internationalization. Principles. There's different things to talk about here, but just one recent example. I was in Croatia. I've got a Croatian bank account. I've got an account in Mexico, and often you have trouble, like if you need to pay for stuff online, a travel ticket or something. Sometimes, one card doesn't work. It's really frustrating. And, I managed to get, I needed to purchase a local flight in Croatia. And one of my cards, it just wouldn't work. And luckily, because I'm a Croatian, I have a Croatian account, I used my Croatian card and I was able to, no problems, buy the card. And so that's just like, one example of internationalizing, having different bank accounts where sometimes you'll get stuck. If you only have like one US account or from whatever country, it might be wise to open different accounts so you can have just a smoother process overall. What are some, things when you think about in terms of, as you say, good countries can go bad very quickly, and so some principles of diversifying and making life easier if you have to move around and escape.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about is you can almost think of the world as different trade blocks. And so you have, sort of a Caribbean trade bloc, also called the CARICOM. You have the NAFTA trade bloc. You have the Mercosur in South America. You have the Andean community as well. Obviously, you have the Eurozone, African Union, former USSR places, and so on. And so there's all these different trading blocks. And I think when people think about building a passport portfolio or internationalizing, is to try to get a little bit of a toe into a whole bunch of different trading blocks, just so that you sort of like have exposure to these different economies that in some ways can operate in a vacuum, and sort of you can diversify your exposure that way.
Let me say something about that. So Yeah, I think you were talking about kind of plan B or escape route or something like that. A lot of people, when they move down to Mexico, they're like, well, I want to take my money out, especially Canada. A lot of Canadians come down, they want to take their money out of Canada. And then since they're living in Mexico, they want to, open a Mexican bank and put it down here. That's not, that's not the way you should look at it. So, again, I think we are familiar with the flag theory, where you kind of think strategically about all the different jurisdictions that you have your residency, have your citizenship, have your banking account, have your assets. If you want to get your money out of Canada or wherever it is, or the United States, then you want to look at, some better jurisdictions. You want to look at jurisdictions that have, good banks, good banking regulations, or, whatever it is that you're looking for, or have, the currency that you want to invest in. If there's some fintech, online banks that maybe will give you access to, and there are also new types of investments with like crowdfunding real estate, all kinds of things that you can do online, or maybe you want to, invest in these I-bonds. A lot of people are buying these days. So you can take your savings and do that instead of just saying, oh, I want to have it sit in a Mexican bank, because honestly, I wouldn't trust any amount of significant amount of money in just sitting in a Mexican bank. There's no reason to do that. I've known of instances where a Mexican bank or a person in the Mexican bank has stolen money out of the bank, the people directly out of their accounts, and then they just have zero balance, and the Mexican authorities are just kind of, shrug, and they didn't really do anything at all. It was amazing. So I wouldn't, recommend doing that. If you can just open up any bank, and it really doesn't matter, because all you're going to do is you're going to be taking out from where it is that you receive your money into a bank account here or wherever it is that you are, and you're just going to take that cash out right away. That's the reason that you're putting it in there. So you're not using it to hold money or anything like that. And so it's really insignificant, how good the bank is or whatever, because, you're not keeping anything over a few thousand or something like that over in there anyways. And just think strategically about what investments you want to use, how to diversify yourself with different countries. If you're into stocks, maybe you want to look at international stocks as well. Another thing, if you're thinking about a plan B, is, if you have real estate overseas, maybe having, some secret place in there that you can have cash, or you can have precious metals and another copy of your passport or something like that. Or a lot of people are using safe deposit boxes and other things like that. So you can think about that strategically. Well, if that's what you're worried about, is having to get out in a hurry, that you could have things in different parts of the world where you have, because another thing, just if you're going to have it sitting in a bank, you might as well just have like stacks of cash of different, currencies sitting somewhere. It's the same thing.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you both for joining me. It was a lot of fun. Vance is over at mylatinlife.com. Check it out. Follow all of the socials if you're interested in coming to Latin America, as well as James over at borderlessblog.com. Both of you enjoy the mezcal or rum or whatever it is you'll be sipping on. That's it for me today. Keep on rocking in the not so free world here on TNT Radio.